They have a special room rate for MSBA members, which we are. You probably need to notify our reluctant secretary over there, Ms. Ace, as quickly as possible. They're much larger room capacity than Pantera was, so I think everybody that wants to go will be able to attend, but you probably need to get it done real rapidly because it will fill. Parking is free in the hotel this year for MSBA or for the conference, and it will run the 24th, 25th, 26th, I believe, Thursday, Friday, Saturday of September. It looks like it's going to. I've been up to the as we've done work on the conference. I've been able to get up to Kansas City and we looked through that facility. It is a huge, huge facility. It will accommodate everything we've ever had in the past as far as meetings are concerned, but it will also accommodate any kind of the vendors. We've been limited in the number of vendors that we're allowed to show in at Pantera. They will not be limited at Kansas City. In fact, the bus contractors are planning to bring buses into the building so that you can look at buses and others. So if you haven't attended a conference in the past, this is probably going to be an excellent one to attend. And I do understand it's 4 hours for us, but it will be a very good conference, and the hotel is very nice and should accommodate all of the members that want to attend the conference. But hope to see you up there.
Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Dr. Ford makes a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Darian, second. All in favor, show of hands. Motion carries 7-0. Citizens updates.
Thank you, Mr. President. We had no one request to present at this meeting as per board policy BDDH.
Written communications.
And we had no written communications either.
Citizens update.
That's all right. We've got, we have our representative from Fort Leonard Wood here today.
Sorry, I'm new to this. Am I supposed to push something?
I think you're good. You push
Okay,
it to
thank
turn
you.
yourself off. So, yeah.
Excellent. You guys might want me to push that. On behalf of Fort Leonard Wood, I really want to say thank you so much for all that you did during this unprecedented time to educate our children. You guys reacted very well, and that means a lot, I know, to the military community, and also just hearing earlier how you're leaning forward, especially to look at those children that are coming in for those PCSs. So it is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much. I just have a couple of announcements. As many of you know, Major General Martin will be leaving us. Her change of command is on the 26th of June at 09. It will be virtual, so we invite everybody to watch it on Facebook, our Fort Leonard Wood Facebook page. We wish her and her husband very well. I know she's been big supporters. And as many of you know, we will welcome General Bonner and his family back to Fort Leonard Wood. So I know you'll see a familiar face there. Also, our Garrison Commander, Colonel Towns, will also be moving as well, and his change of command is the 7th of July at 09, also virtual on Facebook. So please turn in to watch as we say farewell to Colonel Towns. He's been a phenomenal supporter of this community, and we welcome Colonel Payne. And so, unless you have any questions from me, that is all I have right now, and I appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. District announcements, Dr. Henry.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, let me say, please express our appreciation to the Commanding General and Colonel Towns for all the support they've given our school district, especially during these difficult times recently. We do appreciate that. They have been a great team to work with, as everyone on Fort Leonard Wood has been, and we're sure going to miss them, but we know they're on to bigger and better things, and make sure you tell the General I said go Chiefs. Okay.
I will do that.
Yeah, you may want to stand outside the office when you do that. So, but congratulations to our class of 2020. Graduation scheduled for 7:30 p.m. Friday, June the 19th. In the event of inclement weather, 3 graduation ceremonies will be held, one each at 2, 5, and 8 p.m. in the gym. Parents have been notified of their graduates' time, and there is a link to the information on both the district and the high school's Facebook pages. On June the 5th, we reached a milestone, having served 500,000 free meals to children under the age of 18 and under. I want to give a huge note of thanks to our nurses, food services, transportation teams, all of which made this possible, along with those behind the scenes. We will continue delivering meals via bus on weekdays through June 30th, and the meals will be available at our drive-up locations at Wood and Freedom Elementary Schools and the high school through June 30th. Thank you very much. We had many of our employees participate in this, work times that they weren't scheduled to work, and come together to feed our community in this difficult time. So we really appreciate that. Starting in July, we will not be delivering the meals via bus. However, we will offer a pickup service on July 16th and 13th from 8:30 to 10:30 at Waynesville Middle School. Each bag will contain meals for 6 days. If we're able to hold our seated session of summer school on July 20th through 31st, we will offer a pickup service weekdays from 9 to 10:30 at East Elementary, Wood Elementary, and Waynesville High School. Transportation has played a huge role in our efforts to provide meals to children. I want to give a shout out to the Waynesville Transportation Department for receiving a 100% on their recent bus inspections. That's fantastic. I want to say, Dr. Berger, if I'm correct here, this is twice in 3 years, right? 100% that they've achieved, and it's the 20th consecutive year that the Transportation Department has received 90% or higher on their inspections, and these are very detailed inspections. I think every little switch, everything on there, much not like my car at all. Everything has to work, so it's very good. I also want to give a shout out to our food services team in OPA Freedom Elementary's kitchen, and that was with Freedom and East staff working together in that kitchen, scored a 100% on its summer feeding program inspection and got huge praise from the Department of Health and Human Services. Providing we can safely do so, new student enrollment will be held August 5th and 6th at Waynesville High School for all new students, regardless of the grade, and the students the grade the students will be entering. The hours are 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. August 5th and 6th, and everyone should enter the main doors at Waynesville High School. The first day of school for the 2020-2021 school year is scheduled to be August 24th.
All right, thank you. Consent agenda items, financials, Dr. Berger.
Thank you, Mr. President. The financial for June 15, 2020 in the MOSIP account, $46,068,827. CDs with the Bank of Crocker, $10.5 million. In the general account, $1,390,950. Payroll account, $102,335. Total funds, $58,062,113.
Thank you, Dr. Berger. Do I have a motion to approve consent agenda items A through D?
So moved.
Dr. Form makes a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Hey, you got one.
Roll call, or a show of hands
Got one in
for
there.
yes. 7-0, motion carries. Staff recognitions, Mrs. Bells.
Thank you, Mr. President. If we can put the picture up of Breanne Garcia, but at work she's known as Bree. Breanne has been with us for the past year as a bus aide for our transportation department. She always has a smile on her face and has an upbeat personality. She's always willing to go above and beyond for anybody that she works with, but especially our kids. And it is my pleasure to congratulate Bree on being June Transportation Employee of the Month.
Congratulations to Bree. Now move to discussion items, Waynesville Middle School construction update. Dr. Berger.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Don Hussman is here for his monthly visit.
Good evening, everyone. We are reviewing images from June 10th, which was a very rainy day. So if these look a little overcast, they certainly were. Construction is really moving along quite a bit now. As you look at the building, almost all of the exterior walls are in place now. I understand just recently that the last floor slab was poured, so it's really beginning to come together, as you might guess. This is a view, a little kind of have to stare at it for a moment, but the existing gymnasium on the right of the image, that's the northwest corner of the building, and then the new construction, single-story construction that is wrapping the gymnasium. view in the opposite direction, so we're looking at the northeast corner. And you can see that those gray walls, that's the waterproofing that's been installed on the walls, and then next will come the face brick. So that will really begin to change and look very much like a building. We're looking at the new entrance into the gymnasium, that high cap roof area in yellow that will all be clad in the metal silver cladding, and then that is quite a transparent vestibule there, and we're looking through the columns. Similar image just a little bit further back. And sorry about those ominous skies. They really it was raining a lot that day. Now we're at the far end. That's closest to us in that image is the music room. And we're looking just immediately to the right of that area. In the background is the new main entrance into the building, and that's really beginning to take shape now. Now we're back at the other end, and we're standing in the lobby, what will be the lobby of the going into the main gymnasium, and we're looking through those two structural columns. Those will be clad, and again, that will all be a glass front on there, so it'll be very, very nice entry point into the gymnasium. As we're monitoring the interior work, a lot of this interior studs now are going up. There's the roofing is, well, it may have started by now, but as of the 10th, it hadn't been started. I know materials were scheduled to be delivered, so once we get the roof on the building and it becomes watertight, then not only the studs, but then the drywall will start being installed and it'll really begin to take shape. This is looking at what will be the connecting point. That glass, what was a window, will ultimately be an opening, and that will connect phase 2 into phase 1. Work continuing in the gymnasiums now. They're painted. They're beginning to install the, you can see the basketball standards and drops, and I think the next image shows the standards are already, or the glass backstops have been delivered, and they'll be installed, or they could be installed now. But it's really beginning to take shape. The gymnasiums, both of them are, and they really are very, very improved with the new painting scheme. This is kind of interesting. I always visioned this when we designed it, that little passageway that goes into the courtyard. It seems so small, and it does feel small. I know that a truck will fit through there, and we did turning radiuses and things like that to make sure that we can get a vehicle back there. But primarily, service vehicles to take care of the lawn and other things that will be back there will go under that passage. I believe this is the last image, and it's showing all of the infrastructure going in, all of the sprinkler pipes, electrical conduit and such, and that wall that's to the right is the existing gymnasium wall. And that is the last image I have. Can I answer any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Don. End of the year performance data, Dr. Atkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening. Tonight I'm going to share our end-of-year performance data. This data is monitored throughout the year within the classroom and within grade-level collaborative teams, and it is used to guide instructional planning and intervention. Our building steering teams review this data regularly as part of their building PLC process, and at the district level, our district leadership team reviews data as well to find areas that we need to strengthen and also to identify those things that we're doing really well. Tonight, I'm going to review the district writing prompt data, standards proficiency, and our end-of-year STAR assessments. One note, students took these assessments from home, so that was a little bit different. We do not have data for grades K1 and 2 in this because we were not one-to-one at those levels, and we just didn't expect them to do all of those from home. So their data is not included in here. Some students chose to take them, but not very many. So most of what you'll see reflected is grades 3 and up. Now, on some of the slides, you will see reference to kindergarten, first and second grade data, but that's because they took assessments in previous years or earlier in the year, so we don't want to lose that because that's trend data that we'll still want it to follow. So our district writing prompt is given 4 times per year, and we generally give that from kindergarten through 10th grade, and we measure 3 areas. The first is question, and students are given an unfamiliar text, they read it, and then there is a prompt. So this would be similar to what they would do on a test or on a standardized test, or just in general, if they were reading, they have to make some decisions about information that they're reading. Our end of the year, we were at 65.1% proficient on question. So that has stayed pretty stable. It's pretty flat since our second prompt. Text evidence on this standard, on this portion, students use evidence from the text to support their answer. One note, there's no prompt 1 data for text evidence because this year we did a diversity writing prompt and we did not give them something to read because we wanted their answer to come from within, so we did not assess text evidence on the first prompt. But we did end the year on text evidence at 54%. We were down a little bit, but again, kids were doing this from home, so they didn't have the typical support that they would leading up to this. And conventions also went down a little bit because our conventions increased throughout the year and our expectations, and so those did end the year a little bit down. High school, their proficiency on conventions is not really that low. They changed their rubric this year and made it extremely rigorous, so we are redesigning it for next year because we need to make sure we are assessing the right things and at the right level. So they did not all of a sudden from prompt 1 to prompts 2, 3, and 4 forget how conventions worked. So we will be addressing that as we go into the next year. Our standards proficiency, this is multiple years of data on our standards, and we did end this year up slightly from where we were last year in English Language Arts for pre-K through 6th grade and ELA. Again, this is a snapshot of where we were. We had really good participation from our elementary students in the virtual world. Some kids had some help at home that they wouldn't if they were in the classroom. Other kids didn't have quite the support they would have had they been in the classroom. So we figure it kind of found its balance, but it definitely gave us some areas to focus on as we go into next year with our planning. In math, we ended at 75.7%, which was slightly down from last year. But when we look at our STAR math performance at these grade levels, we went up, and that's a nationally normed test. We really worked hard to make sure that our assessments this year were aligned to the correct level of rigor for the state. So while on our internal assessments we saw some decline, we did see on more nationally normed things trending upwards. At the middle school, there's been a transition at secondary over the past few years from just generalized end-of-unit assessments that have been in place for years in education at the secondary level to really getting more standards focused. So we're definitely seeing some ups and downs in our data over multiple years, but we've definitely been focused on aligning those assessments specifically to the standards and engaging in deeper discussion around those standards. So we expect as we next year and into the following year that we'll see some of these level out and then begin to increase as we get more comfortable with that specific standards focus. And at the high school, very much similar to what we see at the middle school, our conversations around standards are improving and our assessments are getting a lot stronger. So as we have those stronger assessments year to year, we'll see some of this start to level out. Star reading. We give the star reading test 3 times per year, and this is a nationally normed test. And again, first and second grade did not participate in this. The percentage of students meeting the benchmark at each grade level, meaning they were considered on level, ranged from 51 to 77% depending on the grade level. And at the district, we ended up at 61% on level. And again, our students did take this from home. And participation was lower than what we would normally have in some grade levels. It was 50 to 60% of students. So we are missing an entire set of students who did not participate. When we look at our average grade level equivalency, they average the scores for the students at that grade level and see where they averaged out. And in grades 1 through 5, the end of year average grade level met or exceeded the actual grade level. And in grades 7 through 10, we saw increases from where they were at last year. So while they might not have been quite at end of year grade level where we would want them to be, we're definitely seeing it trend in the right direction. The STAR test also gives a scale score that says if a student scores here, this is what their grade equivalency would be. Grades 3 through 5 and grades 7 and 10 all exceeded the grade level scale score average cut mark for their grade levels. Also, we look at growth because sometimes you just can't look at where kids ended up. You have to see how much they grew during the year, because if they started lower, they may not quite get to the proficiency level you want them at, but they may have grown quite a bit. So we do look at where they started, where they ended, and how much growth there was. So the blue line is the average scale score at the beginning of the year. The orange is the average scale score at the end of the year. And then the gray box tells you how much growth there was. So that wasn't any sort of decline. It just shows you how much growth there was. And then that small box shows you in third grade, you expect 69 points of growth between the beginning and end of year. So that's really what we're looking for. And you can see in third grade, the average scale score grew 182 points. So exceeded by quite a bit the expected growth. Plus, they were above the benchmark as well. In fourth grade, the end of year average scale score was 559, which exceeded the spring benchmark cut score of 479 by 80 points, and all buildings exceeded the spring benchmark cut score. And then they averaged 117 points of growth. In fifth grade, the end of year average scale score was 626. That exceeded the spring cut score of 584 by 42 points. And then they also grew 89 points throughout the year, so they exceeded expected growth. In grades, when we look at grades 6 through 10, the end of year scale score exceeded the spring benchmark cut point in grades 7 and 10. And then our beginning to end of year growth exceeded expectations for grades 7 and 8. So we do know that there's still some work to do with our secondary reading and ELA, and this will be one of those points that we'll dig into a little further with our teachers as we're designing instruction for next year. In STAR Math, we are assessing students' math performance. Again, we do not have scores for first and second grade. All students in grades 1 through 8 are assessed, and overall, our percentage of students scoring proficient or advanced remained fairly level with last year. We did see a little jump up in 7th grade, so that was good to see. When we look at average grade level equivalency, first and second grade, again, did not test, but in grades 3 through 6, the average end of year equivalency was at or above grade level. And while grades 7 and 8 ended up just slightly below their end-of-year grade level. They have made consistent growth over the past 3 years in math, and I would attribute that to our Go Math implementation and that stronger standards focus, so we will continue that work because it is yielding those gains when we look at some of these other measures. Our end-of-year scale score was fairly flat across grade levels, again with a little bump in 7th and 8th grade. In 3rd grade, the average scale score, we ended the year at 676, which exceeded that national benchmark cut score of 565 by 111 points. And then the average scale score grew 149 points from beginning to end of year. In 4th grade, the average scale score was 715. They exceeded that nationally normed cut mark of 627 by 88 points, and the average scale score grew 104 points. In 5th grade, we ended at an average scale score of 763, exceeded that 684, which is that national mark, by 79 points. All buildings exceeded the spring benchmark, and overall, they grew 74 points from beginning to end of year. 6th, 7th, and 8th grade ended the year with average scale scores exceeding the benchmark cut scores, and 7th and 8th grade exceeded growth expectations. So as we go into this next year, we'll look at these multiple assessments that we've given to find those areas that are strong. What areas are we going to need additional intervention? And it'll also help us to identify some areas, knowing that kids missed a quarter of school, some areas that we'll need to focus on next year and provide additional support. Are there any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Atkins. Alternative at risk report, Mrs. Hedrick.
Good evening, Mr. President and board members. I'd like to present to you the alternative education program for school year 2019-2020. Our current enrollment for PIC Alternative School is 24. Our projected enrollment for PIC for 2020-2021 school year is 45. Our current enrollment for our alternative suspension placement is 3. One of those is an 80-day suspension, and the other 2 are short-term. Our current enrollment for homebound is 1. We had one graduate in December. For June, this week, we're going to have 1 graduate and 2 that will graduate through Missouri Options. Our transitions, we've transitioned 2 to the Waynesville Middle School, 2 to the Waynesville High School, 2 to Evening Tiger Campus, and 3 to Missouri Options. Our partnerships are with the Waynesville Career Center. We had 1 student that attended a half day in the morning for welding. For athletics, one of our students participated on the Waynesville High School varsity football team. Community Resource Office, we have students that volunteer on Wednesdays for Snack in a Pack. Our 2020 and 2021 school year volunteering, we're going to do some volunteering with Williams Elementary, the U.S. Red Cross, the Fort Leonard Wood Veterinarian Clinic, pretty much the animal shelter, Clark Library, Main Post Chapel, and Thrift Shop. We have students that go to the USO every 6 weeks, and that is an incentive field trip for them. Professional development, we've had some really good professional development with Piney Ridge staff on Trauma Informed. We had one of the bankers came in from the Infused Credit Union and did a lesson on budgeting with our students. And we also had a nurse that came in from the Missouri Extension Office, and she did lessons on healthy relationships. Newly implemented this year, we have a cell phone free zone where students just turn in their cell phones at the beginning of the day, and then they are returned at the end of the day, or they kind of earn some free time with their phone at the end. A recovery room, and this is just a place where students can refocus. Admentum is one of our new courseware. It's a standard-based online learning program. And attendance, academics, and behavior goal setting and tracking. We track those for students to go back to their home school, whether it's the middle school or the high school. They meet a criteria of 3 referrals or less, 90% attendance rate, and 70% or better in academics. We have some special education action plans that we are working together with the middle school and the high school. Our building climate team, we have 2 members this year on that team. Our district common team meeting reports, we've implemented those this year along with all the other schools, and that's during our PLC time. We have building level behavior interventions, doing PBIS, the positive intervention support, and we got a full-time custodian this year. For celebrations, all of our staff are crisis prevention certified, and that's just a safety management plans. 100% growth in teachers meeting their evaluation targets. We had 71% average student assessment score based on our team meeting reports where we collaborated for PLC. Average attendance was 46.34%, but that has improved by 13 points from last year. Edmentum, our credit recovery program, we recovered 30 credits this year and 60 semester credit recovery courses completed. We also have a increased student interest in WCC for next year. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cedric. Proposed job descriptions, Mrs. Bills.
Thank you, Mr. President. The following attached job descriptions are presented for your review as a first reading. 4.8.3, Project Bid Specialist. 4.8.4, Accounting Specialist. 4.8.5, Payroll and Benefits Specialist. 4.8.6, Purchasing Accounts Payable Specialist. 4.8.9, Admin Secretary Operational/Personnel Services. 4.9.2, Student Service Specialist. 4.12.6, Information System Specialist. And again, this is just part of the restructure that the board approved last month.
Thank you. Proposed 2021 student handbooks, Mrs. Bills.
Thank you, Mr. President. The attached student handbooks are presented to the school board as a first reading. It is the Waynesville Student Handbook, Waynesville Career Center Student Handbook, Waynesville Career Center Adult Handbook, PIC Handbook, and the Piney Ridge Center Handbook for approval. And if you have any questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to contact my office or Student Services between now and the next Board of Education meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Bills. Move the action items. Fiscal year 20 budget revision, Dr. Berger.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to close FY20. And really, as we look at FY21, one of the most important things we can do is close FY20 because it kind of sets the template for building the budget for the following year. Well, as you can see up here on my timeline, we've still got a lot of work to do even for the current fiscal year of FY20. We'll actually close the books on the 30th. We'll continue to work on the annual Secretary Board report, and that deadline's for August 15th. We'll have the audit that'll be offered for board approval sometime before the turn of the calendar year. And then typically at the mid-year retreat, we go back and have a kind of a look back at the previous year by looking at the SBR, because that's really a nice snapshot and it's kind of easy to comprehend. It's been an exciting year in FY20, to say the least. Probably as volatile as any year I've served in, writing maybe budgets for, I don't even know, off the cuff, maybe 15 years for school districts. So I won't go line by line there. That's too many words for a slide, but you can see down there at the end on June 3rd, just recently as June 3rd, districts were given notice that the SAT would return again to the full funding of $63.75, but because the governor had intended to also do withholds that would impact hold harmless schools, which I know we have some general knowledge of what those are, but those are school districts that typically cannot be withheld from by law, but under the circumstance of an emergency, the governor had the latitude to do that, so we put back in full funding, but then there was a proration factor that was put on the basic formula, which we haven't even seen yet, because it will come out in June 20th, although there is a projection tool that was given to us that we could project that out. And that last round of cuts equaled $650,000. To the positive, there were several things. Food service will take us till beyond June 30th to really nail down the positives of that, but it will end up positive. But a couple that are clear now is, for one thing, the CARES Act. And we spoke last month about we're going ahead and bringing that money in. Sooner than later is the general approach of most CFOs in the state. And so we'll bring in, for the current year, 75% of that $619,000 for current fiscal year, which will help us this year. Also, classroom trust fund and Prop C revenues will also be amended to the latest information from DISI. I might mention Prop C sales tax, something that I always budget pretty conservatively. Actually, through all this, have done really, really well. So they're going to end the year close to projections, and we've been fairly aggressive with that moving into 21, but more to come on that in my next presentation. Expenditures, I reported last month that one of the savings was the PenMac expenditure. We'll net gain about $221,000 there. And then this last bullet, this is always important for just a few districts in the country, but Fund 1 expenditures will be screened for Fund 4 applicability and processed for transfer to the Capital Projects Fund. Capital expenditures do not count towards the PPE, and of course that's one of the three criteria that we have to continue to be 125% less of state average and per pupil expenditure to maintain our eligibility for Impact Aid B2, heavily impacted. So to close the year on 20 for the board, at this moment anyway, I'll ask him for this motion. Mr. President, that's all of that one, unless there are questions on FY20.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the 20 budget revision?
I'll make the motion.
Mr. Parner makes the motion, Mr. Quinn second. All in favor, show of hands. 7-0, motion carries. Budget proposal, Dr. Berger.
Thank you again, Mr. President. The budget I always mention is 80, maybe with the appendix, 120 pages. You can break it down by department, by object code, and it gets, you can get it down into a little bit of pieces so you can kind of comprehend it. And I welcome any board members tonight or certainly in the next couple weeks to come to the office. I have that occur sometimes. I know I have sometimes students come in for interviews. I think you were in my office probably within the last 2 years, maybe, yeah. So, and sometimes staff members, too, that are just interested, and occasionally patrons. Goals that we set forth every year, and really for 7 years, those have been unchanged. And kind of the timeline for the budget, some big rocks the board has already moved. We did the salaries and benefits, you'll remember. The directors submit department budgets to us, to the business office. We look at those. Dr. Henry looks over those. Building projects. We do a lot of work with that in this district and have done a lot of great work in over the years and have a good plan moving forward. Capital projects from the buildings are also submitted to the central office. We put together this big book and pending board approval tonight. This looks a lot like the SBR. We're going to look at this 2 times in this presentation, so I won't get into a great deal of it in this slide, but just to orientate you just a little bit to it, you'll remember that that funds 1 and 2 operations are these 2 columns, and capital outlay is here, and it's important to make that distinction between operations and Fund 4. What is missing here, and it's on virtually every other school district's ASBR grid, would be a debt service. Our district is very fortunate that we do not have a debt service. We don't have to run a levy for the great facilities that we have. A couple of unknowns. I always provide a slide of this each year, but Net general revenue collections are down 7.4% compared to last year. We'll see what June's totals come in on. We don't expect them to be any, they're not going to go positive. We'll just hope that maybe we'll make a little bit of dent in that 7.4, and that perhaps that would go down. One thing that is inevitable, but it's a huge range. The governor may need to make $300 to $500 million in total state budget cuts for FY21. That is not just for public ed. That is for state budgets, healthcare, prisons, MoDOT, everybody. But we're going to get a pretty large slice of that. I think conventional wisdom is a third. So a third of $300 million or a third of $500 million. On the federal side, a known for us, but one that we need to keep at the forefront is the hold harmless status for B2. And that's good through fiscal year 25. And again, just to underscore the fact that Proposition 1 was critical in extending the time we received those heavily impacted funds. Budget highlights into 21. Again, a wordy slide, but I'll pick a few things to speak to just a little bit here. For the seated board members that have been with me for most of my 7 years here, I've talked about this many times. Our district is at a great advantage. We are still, of the 516 Missouri school districts, 93% have a higher local tax rate. Just phenomenal, and folks that are looking from the outside in just can't hardly believe that about Waynesville. The big question mark moving into FY21, and there are many, but the largest certainly is state revenues. So this target, this SAT, the state adequacy target, is built on 6275. 6375 is full funding. So one thing that I've spent my entire financial part of my career focused on, and kind of a commitment is, every year I want to budget conservatively. So if there's a spectrum, I'm going to always start my budget work on the conservative side of that. And, if we do that every year, it kind of keeps us in check. And when something comes up, like the current financial crisis that we're in, we don't have to have a knee-jerk reaction. Our reserves are in good shape, and we don't have to drop this SAT, which you can think of that as the amount of dollar per student. It's a little more complex than that, but think of it like that. We don't have to drop that down to 6,100 or 6,000. We can stay not aggressive with that. That still reflects a cut, but we don't have to have this knee-jerk reaction because we don't want to impact programming. The boards before me, long before me, but certainly the current board have done a great job of making sure that we have adequate reserves to kind of get through those rough times. So the district is certainly in a great position to do that. And we'll have to monitor it, and that SAT could go down, and at the January revision, that will reflect that and see what financial position we're in. Federal revenues are always conservatively budgeted at usually about $15.5 million, $15.8 this year, and typically we'll bring in well more than that. The bad news there is we don't know what the next year's budget is for the feds, because we'll pass our budget in June here, and we don't know what next year's federal budget is until October. But Dr. Henry will go to D.C. and lobby for us and all districts that are federally impacted, and we've had great success in doing that over the years. The reserve balance, one thing to note is there is about $150,000 of our reserves budgeted into this year. Could end up better and could end up worse, and really, worst case scenario, we're in a great position to take that on, but there is $150,000 of reserves budgeted for FY21. Kind of our annual look at how our revenues break down. Something I always like to point out here is this 45% of our revenues come from the state. So we do look like a lot of the school districts in the state, and we are highly reliant on the $30 million-ish that we're going to get just from the minimum guarantee, the state formula. Our property tax is 12.6%. For the state of Missouri, that is 57%. So for the state of Missouri, the typical school district is carrying 50% of the load in current taxes, and at Waynesville, it's 12.6. No, I just, keep trying to express that's just a great situation for our patrons to be in, and that they don't carry a lot of the load for our budget in terms of revenue. Federal revenue, as you can see there, typically we're right around $15.5 million. That's pretty consistent. We don't expect going into October to see that impacted, but we will have to do work to make sure Impact Aid gets their allocation for that. It doesn't happen without a lot of hard work, and I know our district, but collectively NAFIS and MESA put in that work to do, and it's extensive. They're two great professional organizations. State revenue, again, is where the question mark is. That nearly $30 million, and getting in the weeds just a little bit, this may look a little odd. This from previous year, 29.3 to 29.9. That's an increase, but there is a subset of the minimum guarantee called Classroom Trust Fund money, and you would probably know it as gaming money. And that's the amount of money. It's about $2.5 million for our district. That where's the hit is. It calculates out of the formula. The formula is coded 5311. CTF is Classroom Trust Fund money is coded 5319, and the legislature did that for us to give us more flexibility in the gaming money. But that's where the hit is. So the basic formula may look like, okay, no, it's going up a little bit, but the $2.5 million that we get in Classroom Trust Fund money is where they will pull the reduction from. County revenue, we don't get a lot of revenue from that. It stays pretty static across the board. Local revenue, again, this is one place that you won't see a quick turnaround during a time of a recession. If the recession were to extend out maybe, 2, 3, 4 years, you'll start seeing a bigger impact. But right now, we're still expecting to see a little bit of growth. Odd year last year, so reassessment last year for what the county does reassess, revenues will hold pretty steady there. I have a high level of confidence. Other revenue, you name it, we throw it in that line. Miscellaneous revenue can be a sale of a spec house, insurance proceeds. It jumps around a little bit, but it stays fairly level. Breakdown of revenue by fund, perhaps the one thing to point out is our impact aid B2 all go to Fund 4. So typically about $10 million of regular impact aid, basic impact aid, we'll put in operations. We're not at risk of that. We are at risk of allocations going up or down depending on the budget or the continuing resolution, since the feds don't approve budgets. But that impact aid dollars, that gets critical to maintain those, because all of your Fund 4 improvements are happening from B2. Minus the B2, you have to start pulling all these other revenues over to Fund 4 just to maintain. I'm not talking about to build, but just to maintain. $7 to $9 million it takes us just to maintain our facilities. That's not anything new. That's just keeping blacktop on the parking lots. That's keeping HVAC compressors on cycle. Expenditures, some of the expenditure highlights, we always like to mention that we are following through on our promise with Prop 1, and you see those dollars for safety, you see those dollars for technology, still committed to what the patrons wanted when Prop 1 was passed. 1% increase, mentioned that earlier. That was the projection. I think it'll fall a little under that as as some folks retire, and potentially we bring in folks with lesser salary. They'll fall a little on the salary schedule. They'll have less years of experience and potentially less higher degree. On the insurance, 5%. It's not great, but certainly better than probably glad we got it in pre-COVID. I'll tell you that. SOS that Ms. Bills presented a couple months ago, maybe last month. Pay structure, for our head custodians and cooks, we're excited about it. I know they're excited about, and at minimal cost. And below there's some of our programming that will continue. Employee salary and benefits continues to creep up, of course. That's a huge commitment for this board, I'm sure future boards, and the administration. Take care of our people. Number one asset for the district. Incidental expenditure, nothing goes down, but transportation expenditure, that pops up because we know that the $2 million, and that's a really loosey-goosey number at this point. It'll firm up in January, but we'll see. But that's in addition of the facility that will be, we're probably looking at spring, going to bid in the spring. And I have $2 million in the budget. It's very unlikely we'd spend that $2 million no matter how fast we were able to expedite any work to get phase 2 of the transportation facility. Keep in mind, too, that you do get a little bit of revenue back from that expenditure as an allowable cost. So it's minimal, but there was a commitment from the legislator to give us more and more money for allowable expenses. But of course, that's kind of been delayed and put off with the COVID crisis. Breakdown of operating expenses. The big thing to capture there, we update the number every year, but it stays right around 80%. You can see 79.3 salaries and benefits of your operating budget. As we wrap up Waynesville Middle School project, phase 2, the contract total at 19.1, and the FY budget, we anticipate about $9 million. I think I had it actually at 8.9, but rounded it up to $9 million for the budget. We also always try to put a little, I've termed Waynesville or wrap money in, and it's for all the things we forgot. We have it only in one line, so it won't be broke out like that, but we use the spreadsheets in the office, and that's kind of the where we think those dollars will wind up going. Now, we express a little latitude on where those dollars might end up, but perhaps in January that little spreadsheet can be updated too. But if you look for that in the budget, you'd see a $300,000 line item for the Waynesville Middle School wrap. New slide this year, but I thought we'd put it in because, you know, our Fund 4 balances are very, very healthy, and, you know, at least for the foreseeable future, we continue to work. It doesn't mean that we don't take caution and aren't aware of our surroundings, but we're moving on. So this Waynesville High School generator transformer was improved in 20. We did not get that work done. It's rolled over to 21. I'll hit a couple highlights. The FEMA shelter, you know, that's $2 million that's in the budget, and I'm not sure is going to make it. You know, we'll just have to see what FEMA, latest word is, it's still a go, but phase 2 facility down there in transportation, we just spoke about that. So a couple of the highlights of our capital expenditure schedule. Lease purchase agreements, we do have that kind of a double payment coming in FY22. I've got a phone call scheduled for Thursday afternoon with LJ Hart to kind of review that again. But the nice thing is the last time we refinanced, we did cut a year off of our commitment there. And I've mentioned to the board, and I'll say it one last time out of my mouth, is we feel pretty comfortable at about $20 million debt at any given time. And we're in great shape. That'll term out in 29, depending on over the next 3 or 5 years and how we come out of this COVID crisis that we're in. You know, you can look at that and see if you would like to expedite some of the schedule, the capital projects schedule. That puts you on the hook for about $1.5 million annually in terms of paying back that debt. But I've always felt really comfortable at about $20 million on that. Capital expenditure, those are budgeted totals. We've not always met that. That $23 million, you know, we will not meet that this year because I've got a lot of the Waynesville Middle School in 20 that we will not pay out in 20, so it'll roll over to 21. Total district expenditure, I think I mentioned last time we used to say $75 million budget, but with what the expenditures in capital that we've been taking on the last really more aggressively, maybe 3 or 5 years, with particularly with the middle school project, you know, our budget has grown. And back to this slide of operations and capital outlay, I will tell you that $16 million represents about 24% reserves. I've got a call scheduled with our auditor for Friday. I've talked to Ms. York and Mr. Harrison of the business office, and everybody kind of knows the plan to try to raise those reserves a little bit. It takes $1 million to raise us about 1.5%, so we would hope to land at about 17.1 at the close of 20, which of course would, if everything stayed in place, and it won't, but would close 21 at $1 million more too. It may be a little more than that if we can do that, but right now our target is really try to get $1 million pushed over to Fund 1 for operations. And again, if we can do a little more, that'll come out when you review the ASBR in the mid-year retreat, if not before.
If you can move that over, Chris, what'll that bump us up to, 25, 26?
Yeah, and of course, the board policy has 20%, and that speaks to how conservative the board has been. But we're at 24%, so 25 and a half, and I'd really love to see it at about 26 and a half.
I'd like to see it about 28.
Yeah, and it's a little bit limited. No, we've always said the Fund 4, once it gets over there, it's hard to get back over in operations. So it will really be, and that's kind of what I want to talk to Rebecca Friday about how we can, as we're bringing money in this year for the current year for 20, as opposed to taking some of that money into Fund 4, let's revenue that in because transfers are going to be limited, but I might be able to bring that money straight into the operations, even if it's a one-time thing. Even if Mr. Harrison comes to you and says, I know Dr. Berger has mentioned never put impact aid, heavy impact aid into operations. Well, you don't if you're going to plan, it's going to be a reoccurring expense. But if you were going to do a one-time dose in there of $500,000, $1 million or something, just to pump those reserves, that may be a good strategy. And that strategy will clarify as Mr. Harrison and Dr. Henry start working that budget. We're hoping there's a lot of information that really comes to light after the turn of the fiscal year in July. And I'll speak to that just a little bit. The one thing that is it's out there, but certainly I think CFOs across the state are putting a lot of credence in, is this July 15 delayed tax return filings. That's really put a cash flow issue out there for the state and consequently for us. If the state isn't getting money, we're not going to get money. So after that July 15 and maybe 30 and I'm hearing maybe even 60 days for all that to flesh out, for the state to get their hands on the money, to get it pushed down to all the allocations, I think that the governor is going to have a much better idea of what challenge he has ahead of him for FY21. The district is likely to realize a positive balance in 20. Now that's current year, the year that we just had the motion for. The previous year, FY20, we expect a positive balance. So to add to an already healthy fund balance to meet the challenges of the next few years. Short-term use of reserves can be expected as we work through 1 to 3 years. And 1 to 3 years. So whether it be $150,000 as budgeted this year, because I can tell you, we don't know what it'll be at the end of the year. There's too many unknowns. But for the next 2 or 3 years, I would not be alarmed if you have to dip into your reserves. There was a good plan mapped out, and that's what the reserves are there for. If the board has set a limit of 20%, and we hope to get to 26 or 27%, once you get below 20%, that's the time that I still wouldn't say knee-jerk. 20% reserves is wonderful. But that would be the time that we got to get to work, and certainly I don't have to preach that to the administration because we're doing common sense things already as discussed in previous board session, not to mention the study session. Additional relief, federal relief and stimulus funding will likely be needed to keep restrictions from lasting through the end of 21. So the House, from the feds, the House has another stimulus bill. The Senate really isn't, at this point, willing to take that on, and we'll just see. The governor gave that a 50-50 chance of happening. I would say it has a little better chance than happening. But again, whether it happens or not, we'll be okay. If it happens, we'd be a little bit better, of course. Operations, talking about these common sense things that are just the low-hanging fruit. The district has approximately $250,000 in staffing that is budgeted but has not been hired. And I'll tell you, we're doing that this year. I'm telling you about it. That's common practice. Ms. Bales always has positions in the staffing plan that she just does a really good job. The principals are absolutely wonderful. Yes, they will ask, and then we analyze that. Sometimes the decision is delayed. Sometimes the decision is made right now. Go grab them now. But it's really everybody pulling in the right direction. And that $250,000, may be used by the end of the year, but that'll be good because that'll mean we have more students and that'll generate revenue. So it really works out really well. Capital. And this is just, again, our teams pulling together where Mr. Harrison, Mr. Henson said, we got this technology plan. We can trim $300K out of that without even missing a beat, without never hitting the classroom at any level. And so we vet that out. They work on it a week. They come, we can do it. And, there's just another example. So those things honestly do happen every year, but certainly there was more focused to come up with solutions this year. So, but they don't impact the classroom at all, so. I'll entertain any questions you have, but that's the FY21 budget.
Any comments or questions? I have a motion to approve the budget proposal.
I make a motion that we keep Dr. Berger around for another couple of years. Yeah, I make that motion.
I have a motion to have a second.
Second.
Dr. Fulmer, second. All in favor, show of hands. 7-0, motion carries.
Chris, I know you want to move on, but I won't tell you what we think here.
I thank you very much, and it's
Good
been,
luck.
thank you, and it's, want to express that it's been humbling, mostly an honor to serve our children and the community of Waynesville. It's definitely highlighted my careers. Thank you.
He's not done.
I'm not, but I do have two more agenda items, but they're brief.
Food services, price setting, Dr. Berger.
A little bit of good news, that does go through a formula at DESE, and they kind of kick that out to us, and we can appeal it, but no increase to food service pricing across the board. We thought that was wonderful for our patrons this year.
Do I have a motion to approve the food service price setting?
So move, Mr. President.
Mr. Dye makes a motion. Do I have a second? Second. During second. All in favor, show of hands. Motion carries.
And lastly, another technology surplus that this one's devoted just to technology. And ever since we've been putting stuff on Gov Deals, we get people literally from out of the nation that bid on our stuff occasionally, sometimes in nation or in the U.S. to ship them out. So we'll anticipate getting a little bit of revenue that will go into that miscellaneous line for FY21.
I have a motion to approve the technology surplus. Harn makes a motion. To have a second. Mr. Harns makes a second. Show of hands, please. Motion carries. Dr. Berger, thank you for your time. It's been great working with you. It's always nice to have an open door to go into and explain things, and you will be missed, and we appreciate it, and come visit when you can.
All right, thank you very much.
High school science textbook proposal. Dr. Atkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. Based on a textbook review process and teacher feedback, we're recommending Inspire Science Biology for our high school biology classes. We're proposing to order 120 bundles, and that is the textbook with 6 years of online access. Those hardback books would be for classroom use and for checkout for students who want the hard textbook, and then 290 just online licenses only for the 6 years, and then 4 sets of teacher manuals. The average cost per pupil per year comes out to $16.72. That's how that 42,000 breaks down. And then for ecology, 135 students in that class. So we will be looking at 135 6-year online licenses and 40 textbooks for classroom use and checkout, and then 1 set of teacher manuals, and that comes out to $25.90 per student per year over the 6 years. And again, that was their review and recommendations. So administration recommends approval of the proposal as presented.
Any comments or questions? Do I have a motion to approve the science textbooks?
So moved.
Dr. Fulmer makes a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Darian makes a second. All in favor, show of hands. 7-0, motion carries. Thank you, Dr. Atkins. 2020-21 board schedule, Dr. Henry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just, we have the board schedule for meetings. This does not include special sessions, obviously, that we schedule in the interim. Just want to point out that there are a few dates on there for your calendars that we do get into either holiday situations or the September and March dates conflict with our NAFIS National Conference and Hill visits. Then, of course, January 19th, Dr. Martin Luther King holiday, February 16th, President's Day. So there are a few just to catch on there. I know that when you're scheduling, if you're like me, you like to put recurring on there, but it doesn't recur a few times coming into next year. So I would submit that for your approval.
Okay, motion to approve the board schedule for 2020-21.
Second.
Mr. Harns makes a motion. Do I have a second? Mrs. Dye, second. All in favor, show of hands. carries. Pandemic reopening document, Dr. Henry.
Thank you, Mr. President. As we mentioned in the intro here to this particular item, this is a set of guidelines, what we're going through as a nation and certainly as schools. It's very fluid, to say the least. And we could wake up tomorrow with a new set of restrictions, may be totally different. Everything looks pretty good for tomorrow. That was a bad example to use, but you never know what's going to happen by August 24th. So we just want to, let the board know that these are guidelines. We'll certainly keep you updated on it, but the biggest reason is we wanted you all and our community to be aware of our policies and procedures kind of going into this in hopes that we get everybody back to school on August 24th. That's what we want to do more than anything else, is have the kids here. But this will kind of show what happens if we're forced into different situations. So.
Any comments or questions?
Will that be released to the public after tonight?
Yes, yeah, it's a public document.
I have a motion to approve the pandemic reopening document.
So moved.
Dr. Foreman makes a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Green, second. All in favor, show of hands. 7-0, motion carries. Alternate methods of instructions, Dr. Atkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Alternate Methods of Instruction, or AMI plan, outlines expectations when schools are closed and AMI is implemented. It outlines expectations for students and teachers during distance learning, as well as student attendance requirements. This plan aligns with the expectations of the Missouri Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and we have submitted our AMI application that aligns to their requirements to them as well. So we are recommending approval of the AMI plan as presented.
Comments or questions? Do I have a motion to approve the alternate methods of instruction plan? Have a motion, Mr. Farnum. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Harns. All in favor, show of hands. 7-0, motion carries. Okay, proposed 2020-21 calendar start dates, Mrs. Bills.
Thank you, Mr. President. Attached for your approval are 3 alternate start dates for the 2021 school year, should we need them. But again, for the public, our intent is to use AMI and begin on August 25th if we needed. However, we wanted to be prepared with 3 alternate calendars just in case we need them.
I have a motion to approve the proposed 2020-21 alternative calendar start dates.
This is start on the 25th or the 24th.
We start school on the 24th, but our intent would be to start AMI on the 25th.
Gotcha, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you.
Motion.
Move, Mr. President.
Mr. Quinn makes a motion. Mrs. Dice seconds. All in favor, show of hands. No motion carries. And proposed job descriptions, Mrs. Bills.
Thank you, Mr. President. The attached job descriptions are submitted to the board for approval. 2.4.1 Executive Director Operation Services, 2.16.2 Director of Student Services, 2.28.1 Director of Special Services, 2.47.1 Chief Financial Officer / Director of Information Systems, 3.0.9 Coordinator of Grant Management. And I would like to recommend approval at this time, please.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the job descriptions?
I'll make that motion.
Quinn makes a motion. Do I have a second?
So moved.
Dr. Foreman makes a second. All in favor, show of hands. 7-0, motion carries. I want to welcome Mr. Harns to the board. I'm excited to work with you, hear good things, and we've had a lot of conversations, so welcome.
Thanks, sir.
And we'll, with that being said, closed session, closed record, closed vote is allowed by RSMO 610.021, Section 3, hiring, firing, and disciplining or promotion of employees. And Section 13, individual personal records, performance ratings. Do I have a motion to enter into closed session?
Make that motion.
Mr. Farner makes a motion. Do I have a second? Ms. Dye, second. Roll call vote, please.
Aye. Yes.
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 Yes, we are in closed.
Mrs.